If I go back to the LNER, I'll be on freights and local trains the whole time. I understand, Edward said. I'm sure that if you show you're really useful to the railway, the fat director won't send you away. Yes, you have a point. I'll see to it that Pacific doesn't take my place. Early the next morning, Gordon's driver and fireman arrived to get him ready. Come on, Gordon, his driver said, while the fireman got his fire going. We've got to take Henry's slow passenger train this morning. You should get going, Henry said. That train's due to leave before the express. Thank you, Gordon replied. Once his driver had climbed aboard, he moved forward to the water tower. Alfred was already there, taking on water in preparation for taking the morning's Wildnorwester. The blue engine had to fill most of his tender, and Gordon soon got impatient. Alfred, I've got to get to the station. Patience is a virtue, Gordon. So is punctuality. Alfred finished a couple of minutes later and chuffed off. Gordon quickly took his place. The fat director was not looking happy when Gordon arrived at Knapford. Gordon, I expect my trains to be on time. Gordon glanced over at Alfred, but the other engine said nothing. I'm sorry, sir, Gordon replied a moment later. Don't let it happen again. I'll do my best, sir. With that, Gordon departed, feeling a little bit upset. Alfred hadn't spoken up at all. But then again, maybe the other engine hadn't heard the director. Gordon decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. As Alfred watched Gordon go, he couldn't help feeling a little bit guilty. He'd heard every word of the conversation between Gordon and the director, and he just couldn't let Gordon take the blame for it. Excuse me, director? Alfred called. The fat director came over to Alfred. Yes, Alfred, what is it? Alfred quickly explained what had happened at the water tower. Once he had finished, the fat director nodded. Thank you for your honesty, Alfred. With that, he turned and left. Later that evening, Alfred was backing down onto a goods train in the yard. The day had passed without any further incidents, but he couldn't help feeling worried and distracted. Once again, Gordon had taken the afternoon Wildnorwester, while Alfred had been put on goods duties. It's not fair, Alfred grumbled to himself as he pulled out with his goods train. Amongst the trucks in Alfred's train were two flat cars, one loaded with sleepers, the other with rails. These were to be left at Marron station before the rest of the train was handed over to Neil at Elsbridge. He passed Knapford on the freight line, then soon reached the crossover onto the main. I'm afraid to say Alfred was still quite distracted, and he didn't really hear Thomas whistle as he went past. It had started raining by the time Alfred reached Marron station. I suppose I'd better get these trucks shunted, Alfred grumbled to himself as he ran around his train. As if being replaced on the evening Wildnorwester wasn't bad enough, Alfred thought to himself, Gordon was due through in a few minutes with that very same train. Unfortunately, Alfred's preoccupation meant he wasn't quite paying attention to what he was doing. He came in too fast and bumped the waiting trucks hard. A dull thud sounded out through the fog and rain. What was that? Alfred asked. His driver leant out of the cab. The sleepers have fallen off the flat car. They're blocking the express line. Gordon's whistle sounded out a moment later. Alfred blasted a warning while his driver ran down to halt the express. Gordon burst out of the fog with the express. His crew threw on the brakes and jumped clear. "Ooh!" Gordon groaned as he hit the sleepers. "What happened?" Gordon asked, slightly stunned. "You hit some sleepers which had fallen onto the rails," Alfred explained, slightly shocked himself. "Driver, what about the passengers?" Gordon asked. Gordon's driver quickly climbed down and went from compartment to compartment along the train. Most of the passengers were all right, but a few of them had injuries. Alfred's driver soon returned, and he pushed the trucks out of the way. Winston soon arrived with the breakdown train. "The director's not going to be happy about this, Alfred," he said as he looked at the scene before him. Alfred knew he was right. Early the next morning, the fat director came to see Alfred in the shed. "Alfred," he said, "I will need you to remain in the sheds until the investigation is complete." "Investigation, sir?" "Some men from Her Majesty's Railway Inspectorate will be arriving to investigate last night's accident," the director explained. "I understand," Alfred replied. The director glanced over at Gordon. Winston had helped him back to the shed last night, but he still needed to be inspected for damage. With Alfred sidelined, that left only one engine who could pull the express. "Henry, I'll need you to pull the Wildnorwester this morning," the director said. Henry grinned. "Thank you, sir," Henry replied, and he chuffed off happily. About an hour later, the fat director returned to the sheds. "Engines, these gentlemen are from the Railway Inspectorate. I expect you to give them your full cooperation." There was a murmur of agreement from the engines. The inspectors spoke to Gordon first, then to Alfred, asking each engine for their account of last night's events. While they were talking to Alfred, the fat director joined the workmen who had been inspecting Gordon. "How is he?" he asked. "I'm afraid he's going to need significant repairs, sir." The fat director turned to Gordon. "Gordon, were you told you were here on a trial run?" "Yes. Mr. Gresley said you were looking to purchase me for your railway." "Well, after seeing your performance on the Wildnorwester yesterday, and your rescue of Henry, I've decided to make you a part of our railway. As for your damage, I will have Winston take you to our works later today." "Thank you, sir." The director turned to go, then turned back as another thought struck him. "We'll be giving you a new coat of paint, Gordon. Is there any particular colour you would like to be?" "Well, I wouldn't mind being blue, sir." The director then joined the inspectors as they were interviewing Edward. "Edward, I understand you were speaking to Alfred just before he left on that trip. Is there anything he said that might have a bearing on the accident?" "Well," Edward said. He hesitated and seemed to be considering something. "Edward, if you know something, you should tell us," said the director. "He was quite worried about being sent away, sir. He had overheard a conversation between you and Mr. Gresley at Knapford." "I see," said the director, recalling that conversation. He had actually been talking about Henry. "But what did he actually say?" the inspector asked. "Well, he said he would make sure that Pacific doesn't take my place." "He said what?" "But he meant by doing his best, sir, and proving that he's a really useful engine." Gordon scoffed. "And doing his best includes letting me take the blame for being late, does it?" "I explained all that to the director, Gordon." "Well, you were pretty quiet when he was telling me off." "Well, Gordon, Alfred, that will do," said the director. He turned to the inspectors. "Gentlemen, is there any more information you need?" "We're done here, Sir Topham," but we'd like to speak to the engine who helped with the cleanup. Winston, I believe his name is. By all means. The three men headed over to the car and left. An uncomfortable silence fell over the shed. Gordon was rebuilt and repainted at the works, and given a new tender. The Fat Controller finished. Yes, I was at the works for a week, Gordon said, with an angry glare at Alfred. They had to bring in another engine to look after the Express, too.
Another engine?
Yes, an LNER B-17 class, 87546 or whatever his number was.
Couldn't Henry do it?
Henry was a bit unreliable at the time, you see, and Winston was flat out with Alfred's regular freight trains, seeing as he'd gotten himself suspended. An angry frown crossed Alfred's face, but Diesel spoke before the B-12 could reply. But sir, what about the report from the railway inspectors? They found that the cause of the accident was rough and careless handling of the train by locomotive 98462, Alfred, Gordon said victoriously. The Fat Controller cleared his throat. In the light of that finding, my father had no choice but to send Alfred away. He shot a significant look at Gordon. He also arranged for Alfred to be taken in by the Bluebell Railway, and gave him a second chance following Henry's accident with the Flying Kipper. Do you really think he would have done these had he thought Alfred a deliberate saboteur? I'm sorry, sir, but I'm not convinced.
I don't blame you.
Alice put in. The other engines stared at her.
I apologize, Alfred, but after hearing Sir Tuppen's account, and not knowing you, it doesn't sound good.
Unfortunately, you're right, Alfred replied. He knew he hadn't deliberately set out to derail Gordon. No engine would do that, but proving it would be another thing entirely.